Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to be doing more with drawing with Java. Specifically, we're looking at the idea of how to draw polygons. Last time we looked at what it was going to take to actually draw a basic square or rectangle on our code. We're going to take this a little bit further with the idea of drawing polygons today. And so we take a look at our project really fast. I'm going to go over here and maximize this screen for us so we have access to that. And inside our project right here, we have in our view package, we have our drawing frame or drawing panel or shape panel. And so in our drawing panel is where we did most of the work for that. If we take a look at that really fast, we have right here, and I'm just going to minimize all the methods so we can see the structure of that. We have a bunch of buttons and stuff that we're going to be using for our components. We have our constructor that gets our base control reference to it that goes on. We have our 3 automatic helper methods we use in all of our GUI components. And then we introduce the new feature of paintComponent, the @override method from the Swing library, so we can actually go through and just draw components. Again, remember when we're using our paintComponent, the first line we need in there is super.paintComponent, so we can call the parents method, able to get that ready to go. What we want to do today, though, is we want to make this so it's going to go a bit further. So we have inside our structure right here, we have an instance of our shape panel class called shape panel. And in my constructor, I initialize that shape panel as a new panel. And then I add that panel inside my setup panel. So here's my shape panel right here. I put it in. If I take a look, and go ahead and maximize the screen up here, and I look at my design tab, we can see that in my design tab right here, my shape panel is inside my structure. It's right here. I've got it set so it has a bounding box holding it in place. So my constraints of 50 from either side on the north, east, and west. And then the south, it's 350 squares away from the north edge, or 350 pixels away from the north edge. I could have it set to go away from the bottom. That's fine. These buttons right here, my add rectangle and code to the list, are separate. We're going to be using that later. We'll be having our other buttons added to that in a bit, so we can actually put those buttons in so they draw each component. But what we did last time, we just had it drop basically anywhere on the screen itself. We're going to take this a step further and make it so we're going to only draw now inside this bounding panel that we're using this, so we can actually have it so it's like a panel we're only using for that, for the actual art itself. And that's where we're going to be going for that. So that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at that here. Again, go back to our code tab. And what we're going to do is inside our setup listeners, we have our button that's our add rectangle button. And inside its line of code right here, right now all I have is repaint. What we're going to do instead is of having that right there with that add rectangle, we're going to make it so this is going to have, when I click on the button, it's going to add a component to our thing. In this case, since I've already got the rectangle button here, I'm going to use this to call my triangle method. We'll use that then further to extend this for all of our structures. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our shapepanel.java and take a look at that. So in our shape panel, we'll collapse this down to start off with it. We have inside our shape panel, I have some lists of structures. Up here in my declaration section of my private data, I have a bunch of lists. Each of them are array lists of the type for either rectangle for squares and rectangles, for ellipse 2D for ellipses and circles, or polygon type for triangles and polygons in general. And what we're going to do is we're going to make it set so that we can actually draw all of those polygons inside our structure right here. So we have some public methods right here. They're void methods that we're going to be using to actually do this, and they're just methods we can call externally in our other class that owns this instance of shape panel. And so in my constructor, I just initialize all of my lists to be default, because again, the job of the constructor is initialize all of your data members. So we've done that all year long. Keep it up. Always do that, but it's the job again of our constructor, build those lists. In this case right here, we're just initializing them to default values. So we initialize all those different lists so they have the ability to hold stuff. So when I call this object, it initializes those lists for us. And that's just, again, each name of the list followed by equals new, and then the angle brackets type to indicate this is going to hold polygons, rectangles, or ellipses in it. And again, because a circle is a special type of ellipse, that's using ellipse 2D. A triangle is a special type of polygon, so they are both on the polygon type. So we have that as our basic framework right there we'll be using. So once we've got our constructor built, that just makes it so we have the ability to actually hold stuff. What we want to take a look at today is actually adding polygons to our lists. So to do so, I'm going to scroll down right here to my addTriangle method. Again, I have an add item for each of those different items I have inside this list. And we're going to build that here in just a second. There are no parameters in this method because we're just building it based on the call. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be using the idea of Math.random to get some random information, and then build in a triangle or other polygon based on that random information. So again, the rules of a triangle, we have 3 points we have to deal with. So we have to make an array for this to do this. So all polygons take 2 parameters of arrays to start off, as well as a number of sides. So since all triangles only have 3 sides, it makes it really easy. So we'll go ahead and we'll actually build the line of code for that first, and then we'll go ahead and build the surrounding code for it. So we're going to make a triangle object, so it's a polygon. because all triangles are polygons, so we're using that framework. And we'll call it triangle equals new, and it's a polygon. And the parameters it needs are an array of x positions, y positions, and number of sides. So we're going to make a really boring naming convention here. We'll call it x points, y points, and 3. And then we're going to add that triangle to the triangle list. So we have that right there. So that's the framework of what's going to happen when I call this. Now we need to actually create the spots for those x and y points so we can actually build that triangle using some information. So there's a couple ways we can do this. We have a couple different ways of dealing with an array. So we're going to show one for one of our arrays and another for the other array. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So we'll say int array, and we'll call it x points. Standard way of building an array. I declare it's an int array of that type with that name, and it's 3 big. And then for each position inside that, I need to assign a value. And we're using Math.random to generate some random positions. So to do that, I'll just go like this. I'll say int x points sub 0 equals, and then we cast as an int the math results of Math.random times 150, which gives me a number somewhere between 0, because Math.random returns 0 and 1, and 149. So I have my first x position will be somewhere in that range. I'm going to just copy that line 2 times for each of the other positions and associate it appropriately. So this will be part sub 2 and sub 1. And that gives me now a random number in each of my spots with a potentially larger range up there for every single spot of my x part of my point. Now each point to have a special, to have a location, inside space needs both x and y. And the other way we can do this, we can actually do this in one single statement for the entire array. And so what I can do for my y points is another way. And so I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to say that y points, not poings. So it's an int array y points equals, and then I'm going to use the instantiation list form of an array. And inside that, I'm going to put 3 values. So I'm just going to grab that, copy, and paste it in paste, comma, paste, comma, paste. 3 separate points, automatically randomly generated to generate a size 3 array. So this is sub 0, sub 1, sub 2. Either one of those work to actually generate that, so I now have 3 random points generated for my array. I can either do it this way, where it's point by point. Since I only have 3 points, either way is about the same amount of work. But for dealing with a triangle, it's whichever one is feel most comfortable with. I think for a triangle that this method right here is probably the easiest way to do it, but that's okay. So this now creates 2 different arrays, one of x positions, y positions. Our first spot will be at sub 0, whichever that Math.random is, times 150, plus this y position of Math.random times 250. So my position for my first start of my triangle will be somewhere between 0, 150, and 0 and 250 for my 2 different spots. Then the second point and third point matching appropriately, 250, 450, 350, 250. So I'm creating a random spot with that. And then I add that triangle to my list. So I create the polygon triangle, pass it the x positions and y positions. And because all triangles have exactly 3 sides, we just pass it 3. So right here, I now have my addTriangle method. It adds the triangle, no problem. This is a great time to save and commit to your GitHub account. What we have right here is a triangle in logic itself. It's not on screen. It has not been drawn. It's merely a triangle that's added to our list. So the next step we have to do is we have to make sure that we are able to draw that. And again, for drawing inside swing, that comes down to this lovely method called paintComponent. So we'll expand that method out so we can still see this. We have our addTriangle method as we look at right there. But if you notice right here in my comments, the first thing we have right here is super.paintComponent. We have to make sure we call paintComponent itself, that super method, so we have this properly drawn on screen. The second line we have right here, that graphics 2D, main graphics, again, we want to have more control over our GUI drawing. And so to do that, we cast our graphics object right here, that's the parameter. We cast that as a graphics 2D object. And that gives us the ability to actually draw more information. So that's where that comes into play. And then, as I have my comment right here, I have my loops to do my lists. So every list that I have, aka my triangle list, my rectangle list, square list, etc., I want to draw all of those in here vis-a-vis a loop. So we already did that with drawing it on the main screen, but now we're going to have it draw just right here in this screen. And so we're going to right now go over our triangle list to have that happen. So we're going to use the for each loop for this because for each does it to all of them, and we don't care about the order, which makes it really nice to do. So we'll use a for loop for here, and it's a polygon object that's stored in the list, because again, all for each does require data structure. So current triangle, and then a colon because we're going over that object, and then the triangle list. And so right now, what am I doing for every current triangle and triangle list? Absolutely nothing, but I'm doing it to all of them. So what we want to do is we want to use the idea of either filling these or drawing these. Now, again, the choice on that between draw and fill depends on what you want it to do. The draw method will actually just draw the outline of the triangle right there of some width. The fill method actually colors it in as if you were, say, for example, using crayons or markers. To show this very easily, we're just going to use the draw method. For the assignment, I recommend that you use a mix of the two, having some be draw and some be fill. I recommend generally the idea of polygons outside of triangles always be drawn, not filled. We'll see that though in just a minute. So let's go ahead and let's actually put that together. So we want to make sure we get some colors for this. In order to do colors, we have to have our red, green, and blue assigned. And we like doing random colors, so we'll do that again to practice with Math.random. Red, green, and blue that we have initialized right there. We're also going to get a pen size for this so we can draw it. So I'm going to make an int pencil size or pen size. And I'm going to times that by 10. And I'm going to add automatically 3. So that times 10 plus 3 means it's a guaranteed width of at least 3. Because 0 times 10 is 0, plus 3 is 3, so I get at least a slightly wide line for that. And then once I've got those lines now made, now I want to go ahead and be able to actually draw that. So I have my color and my pen size. Now I need to actually specify the information from my main graphics to associate that information for it. So I'm going to say my main graphics, set color, and it's a new color, and I pass it my red, comma, green, comma, blue, and give some spacing in there so it's a little bit easier to read. Pen size as well, so main graphic, and I'm going to set stroke, and it's a new, and then a basic stroke is the subtype that I can instantiate, and I'm going to pass it pen size. And then my last line for this, I'm going to do main graphics, dot draw, parens, and then pass it current triangle. So that will draw the outline of that triangle inside this panel. So again, taking a quick look at my method so we can review that. I have my paintComponent method. It's important that I make sure I spell this properly. Then it's the @override and visibility protected. My first line of code is to call my superclass paintComponent. Use that one. I then cast main graphics as a 2D type, so I can have access to the methods like draw, set color, set stroke. I get my random color that I'm using, get my new color size, my new pen size, and then I'm going to draw that graphic. So this is the idea that I'm going to have for every time I press my button, I'm going to add a triangle to my list, and then I'm going to call my paintComponent. And so the way that's going to happen, if I go back over here to my drawing panel class, I have right here, my shape panel is the name of the instance of my shape panel, dot add triangle. So that will call that method we just wrote right here, add triangle. So every time I click on it, it calls this method. Now notice that I'm not calling paintComponent directly. Remember, paintComponent is only called indirectly by the user. And I call it indirectly by right here, after I press my button, I call my repaint. Now this repaint happens in the drawing panel class, the one that owns shape panel. Because it owns shape panel, it draws shape panel as part of that. So my repaint only needs to happen right here on that press. Takes care of it right there, so I'll save that. I'm going to go ahead and play my application. And so here's my screen. We have my panel, my shape panel I can draw on right here. My addRectangle button that we're going to use to test this out, where it's going to add triangles. And there is a triangle of some width, another triangle, and notice that all my triangles right here are happening in this chunk. Because that's where I specify that value is between the 0 to 250, 0, 350, 0, 450. So no matter what I have, they're always happening just right there. And I'm drawing just the outlines of triangles over and over again. And we can see how those triangles get redrawn randomly each time I press that button. My addRectangle button, which I'm testing out right now for addTriangle because I haven't thrown all my buttons in there. I call my shape panel the addTriangle method. So I go to my shape panel class because that's an instance right here. Shape panel is an instance of shape panel. I go to my shape panel class. It goes to the addTriangle method. And it then creates a brand new triangle from a set of 3 points, both x and y. 3 random points for that. I have it on the x where it gives it one at a time, the y where it does it all at once, and then I add that triangle to my list. The other button I have right here, my clear button, That empties the list, so I can immediately go out. We'll talk about that one in just a minute. But then I just call that method, and every time I call repaint in the class that owns it, it calls this panel's repaint as well. Because when drawing GUI, because this class right here has that panel in it, when I redraw this whole class, it also redraws this one as well. So that makes it so we have that happening. So this happens every time I call repaint on the other class. And so this right here could also be extracted into a method to clean that up just a bit. But I have to make sure I do it for everything in my list. I do that. So that's the idea of a triangle and how we do that. We're going to do this a step further by adding polygons, which is a bit more work. So that being said, we've got right here where we added polygons with triangles. We're now going to make randomly sized polygons as well. So we're going to go to our addPolygon method. And in my addPolygon method, we have that same approach where we have to have an x points and a y points. But we have right here now the idea that we have a random size. We don't know how many points we're going to need. So to do that, we're going to start off with a new structure. So int number of sides or number of vertices, either one counts. So I'll always get at least 3 numbers on there. On my Math.random, make sure I put my parens on that. So this gives me at least a 3-sided figure up to a 12-sided figure for my number of sides. And I want this number of sides as a variable because I need to use this to actually build some structure. So now I'm going to create my arrays for points. And I'm going to initialize them to that number of sides value. So I'll say an int array x points equals new int array, and we'll say number of sides. And that's going to be the same thing for y points as well, because we want our x and y to have the same number of sides for some crazy reason when building polygons. And then, because we're doing this to both the x and the y each time, we want to use a loop. And it actually matters the order, because we need to also know the position of this. So we can't use a for each loop. So again, we're going to use a for loop for that one. So for int side equals 0. That's where we start off on our arrays. Side is less than number of sides. We get all the sides in there. And then side plus plus. Standard for loop. We'll go through that many sides each time. We always start at 0, so we hit all of them based on that by our counting structure. And I want to then assign into x points and y points a new number. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say x points sub side equals, and then it's going to be a random number. So int, and then Math.random, and times 2000 gives me a round number between 0 and 1999. Definitely fits within the realm. Copy that, paste it again, and change that to y points. Make sure we do address that so we have both arrays attached to that. So we need to have both x and y positions on there. And so now we're going to create however many sides we have, a polygon of that many sides. And because I've specified my sides right here as a parameter, I can now do that same structure right here where I'm going to create my polygon from that. So just like I did earlier, but instead of going to my triangle list, I'm going to put this inside my polygon list. So polygon, my polygon, equals new polygon. And I'm going to pass it again, just like I did earlier, the x points, y points, but this time instead of 3, I'm going to pass it my number of sides, because that'll have whatever value I put inside it. So x points, y points, and number of sides. So it builds my polygon right here. It has somewhere between 0 and 2000 for every single point. So even if I don't see it, I'll have a spot for it. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass it to my list. So my polygon list dot add. Good morning. I'm going to add my polygon into that list. So again, just like we did inside our addTriangle method, I have to identify how big my array is going to be, which I did. In this case, I used it with a number of sides parameter. I assign each point in my array a value. Now, because I don't know how many sides I'm going to do, this way will not work with a polygon, because I don't know how many spots I'm going to be putting into it. It works great with a triangle, but with a polygon, I want to use a loop, so I can make sure I give everyone a point. I have those two variables for my x and y coordinates, using it to store those as an array. I then pass those parameters right here into my polygon constructor, and I add that polygon I just created to my list. So I've now got a polygon in there. Let's go ahead and test this out in code. So I've got my polygon right here. I'm going to do that same approach inside my paint component where I draw all my polygons. So let's go ahead and do a new set of loops right here. And so for parens, not polygon, current, and that's going to be inside PolygonList. And again, we're going to use this right here, the same basic approach. So I'm actually going to copy this code and paste it in here. But I'm going to make a change just so we can see this right here. I'm just going to call this current. And instead of draw, I'm going to use fill so we can see what happens when we create polygons. And since I'm using fill, I don't need to worry about my stroke or pen size because I'm filling that parameter in with what I'm drawing. So again, I have my addPolygon and my addTriangle methods I've completed. So let's go ahead and save that. And again, we can see that structure right here. So I have the idea of I'm looping over all of my polygons in my triangle list. I'm moving over all the polygons in my Polygon list. The triangles will be drawn, and as I use that, I set a stroke. My polygons are going to be filled, so I don't have to worry about setting a stroke. And so I'm going to go back to my drawing panel. In my drawing panel code, let's go ahead and add a button that I've already defined up here for my addPolygonButton. I'll initialize it right here. So addPolygonButton equals new JButton. And then inside my setup panel, I have to add that to it. Again, I have that comment to myself, make sure I put them all in. Choose addPolygonButton, a semicolon. Now that it's added, I'm going to go over to my design panel. As you can see right here, I have that lovely dumping ground code of my base layout.put constraints. I don't want to keep that in my code, so I'm going to put it out here and dump it into my dumping ground method, aka my setup layout. Put it right here on my addPolygonButton. Right now it's set so my addRectangleButton is 10 away from the west. So I'll change this one so it's my addPolygonButton is also 10 away from the west. So I'll just change that right here. I'll manually change it. So 10 away from spring layout.west. And this, and then my addRectangleButton 40 away from the south. I'll make this one be 50 away, negative 50 from the south, negative 50 from the south, and passing it this as well. So now my addPolygonButton is going to be just below that. Let's actually make that negative 60. No, negative 30. Negative 30. If I take a look at my design window right here, it's over here. Oops, I had that a little bit too far over, so let's go ahead and fix that. Make that small little change right here, so my addRectangleButton. And I want to make sure that it's west section right here. That was the problem. So change its west to be there. Go back to my design, my west and west align better. There we go, addRectangle, addPolygon. And my addRectangle is actually just my addTriangle, but that's because I didn't make that meant. So I go ahead and save that. And hit play. Maximize my screen. So here's my addPolygon. My addPolygon's not doing anything. Why not? Oh, what did I do inside my listener? Let's take a look at that. Inside my listener for my addPolygon, oh, I don't have my addPolygon listener button. So let's add my listener for it. addPolygon listener. So addPolygon button dot add action listener. And it's a new action listener because it implements the action listener interface. And inside that I have a public void action performed. Takes an action event as a parameter. I call it click because it makes sense. Get some squigs in there, semicolon at the end. And just like I had shape panel to add triangle, I'm going to do shape panel to add polygon. And my last line of that will be repaint, because that will repaint both the main panel and its associated subpanel. So I now have my addPolygon method right here. It has a listener for that button. Let's go ahead and we'll quit this previous version. Quit that previous version as well. And play this. Hit save, of course, always a good idea. So here's my add rectangle, which right now is only drawing triangles. Drawing triangles, no problem. Now we'll get to the add polygon method. As you can see, I'm putting polygons in here. They're kind of big. They're showing up down here randomly, and they're very sharp angled. See if we can get ones to show up here. As you can see, they cut in on the actual screen. So looking how we have those cuts that happen on it, they cut in very sharply and they draw out over itself. So, and every time they cut, the color changes because it's actually getting that little spot. So let's take this and make it a little bit smaller so we can see this a bit better. So we'll go to our code, go to our shape panel again, and for our polygon, let's cut that size down. Instead of 2000, let's cut that down to just 200. That way we can actually see that a little bit better. We'll play that again. And so now you can see right here, I'm adding a polygon, and every single space right here, this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points. And every time it cuts in and out, it gives a random piece of that. So I'm getting these random shapes, really kind of cool looking, but definitely not a regular polygon. So that's the only thing with that. My triangles are always going to be lovely shapes. And so this is why I recommend when you draw your polygons, you actually choose to draw them, not to fill them, because they tend to look a little bit messy. So let's go ahead and actually change that right now. So we'll quit this application and change that back so we have inside our shape panel, when we're drawing the polygons, that polygon right here, we'll take it and actually grab a draw with a stroke rather than having that. So we'll change the pen size right here. Get a pen size for that. Paste that in. Get the stroke for that and draw. And so we'll grab that as well. And instead of fill, we'll change that to draw. And now when I add a polygon, we can see that lovely shape right here. It says a 4-pointed one. You can see those sharp cuts that it makes and how we have those empty spots inside it, and we can have some really cool nifty things. And we have the clear list right there. So to do that, so we can redraw our picture, make it so we have the ability to have that cleanup area, what I've done is I've made a method called clear. It's a public method. And all I do is for every list in my data object, I just clear it. Remember, clear on a list takes everything out of that list out. And then when it repaints it, obviously there's nothing to draw, so it draws us back with a blank screen. So this clear button right here, my clear method, removes everything from my list, makes it very easy to have a clear screen so I can try drawing again. So taking a look back at our code, we have our rectangle we did in our last video, so we had to do that. Our square is the same thing, but instead of having a width and a height, we just need one parameter for that. The next thing we need to look at is how to do an ellipse. And so we're going to add that right here with doing addEllipse. A circle is a special case of ellipse which only has a height or a single diameter. With our ellipse for this, though, we're going to have a width and height. So we'll take a look at that right here. So addEllipse right now, blank method. Let's go ahead and actually put that one together so we can do an ellipse with this as well. To add an ellipse, we're going to need, again, our X position or Y position to start off. We're going to draw that. So we want to get an X position and Y position set up, and then a width and height, just like we did with rectangles. Same approach. So I have an int X position equals, and then int casting, and then Math.random again. And we'll times this by 1000. Gives us a nice range of space. Our int Y position equals, and the same thing. And I'll actually make that 1500 because it gives us more space for the X because it's a wider screen than it is tall. And then I'm going to do the same thing for our width and height. So I have somewhere in this realm of space I'll be creating my variable. And then to make an ellipse, it's going to be the same approach. So I have right here, instead of having an int array though, I just simply make my object. So it's an ellipse 2D. My ellipse, or current ellipse, we'll do current, equals new. And this is a little bit different. For ellipse 2D, we do 2D, and then dot double, because we have to specify how much control we have over that. And then I pass it my X position as a parameter. Second parameter is the Y position. Third parameter is the width. And the final parameter is the height. And so again, if I look over my hover on that for double, we see I have X, Y, width, and height that I'm passing for those parameters. I'm using an int for that. It takes it for a double just fine. We're good to go. And then all I have to do is add that current ellipse to my ellipse list. So current ellipse, and I'll add current ellipse to it, in with a semicolon. And then inside my paintComponent method, I need to draw every ellipse that's in my ellipse list as well. And so that same process will happen, just like I did for Polygon, current, triangle, and triangle list. I'll have ellipse 2D, current ellipse in my ellipse list, ellipse 2D circle in my circle list. I'll need to draw those as well. And that's where we can have the ability to draw circles and or ellipses inside our structure. And once I've gone through and added all my buttons, I can have a button right here for every one of my components, make this picture be the size I want, and I can have my lovely drawing creating all my random shapes and make some beautiful art.